Welcome back to week 9. Today we're going to be covering chapter 9. This is going to be a relatively short chapter to work through, just giving an introduction to special values and characters within R. So learning about special values. When parsing through the data, oftentimes you will run into situations where values are missing, are not known, are finite, or they're infinite. These are going to be special characters to take into account when understanding your data set. On the right here, we have a couple of those special characters that I just mentioned there. So there are going to be times when your data is going to have values that show up as null, which are values that are unknown or simply do not exist. NA is a missing value, not available. Makes sense. Inf is a value reserved for infinity. Keep in mind, we're working with math here, so there needs to be some sort of representation to the infinity symbol. So here's my console again of a couple of different examples. So we have implicit variable and attributes, which are those that are taken care of by the computer. Implicit variables are assigned by the computer. You don't have to explicitly tell R what the data type is. It's going to automatically do it for you. It's implicit. So we can check this by using type of function on the implicit variable object that I created. And here we see that it's a double. So you don't have to specify the data type for R to imply what it is. Now, explicit variable / attributes are those that explicitly tell R what to consider them as. So if you're coming in from a different programming language as a Java, you have to explicitly state the object at the beginning of the program as an int, a double, or a float, and so on. This is a very similar way of doing it, except R just does it in this particular order. You can go ahead and wrap 4.3 as a double, and explicit variable is a binary object. Not quite what we're looking for here. Same thing as wrapping it in quotations. It's not going to do it as a double nor a string. There's a specific function that we use, and it's as double. We want to specify it, the data type as double, as int, and so on. And you're going to do that in quotation. So we print explicit variable, and sure enough, we get the result we expect, which is 4.3. So learning to check for special values. When importing data, one of the first steps that needs to be done is to check if there are any missing values. You don't want to work on a data set with missing values if you're running calculations. If there are missing values, R will mark them as NA, or if other sources have input them into the data, they may be NaN. Using the function is.na to check for them in the data is something very useful to have. Keep in mind, NA represents not available. So what's the difference between NA and NaN? NaN stands for not a number, but is often misrepresented by those who manually add it. Checking your data set for such values is simply done by using the function is.nan, and you're going to get a return value, that of a Boolean object. So we see here the results is false across the board because the data sets that I've input there have complete data sets. There's nothing missing, there are no special characters, there's no NA or NaNs. Since R is used heavily with statistics and various other math courses / professions, infinity will eventually come up. Sometimes you will have to use the plus or minus infinity sign data type in calculations. To check if it is present, we can utilize the is.infinite function. Just as the other functions before, it returns true or false. You always want to make sure that these special characters are not in your data, or if they are, you need to know how to handle them, which is why it's always a good habit to check for these things before you start analyzing your data. Lastly, searching for null values. Null values are represent empty objects and is often returned when functions whose values are undefined. This can be set manually into datasets or returned by functions. So on the right here, we are still moving forward with empty cars, and we're going to subset the miles per gallon column into a variable called null examples. Let's take a look at the head of it. There's the numbers. We check if is.null. We're checking if there are any null objects in this, and sure enough, there isn't any. But we can also change the values of an object by passing the value null onto that same object. So if we pass null onto null example and we print null example, it's going to be null. It just changed the entire object.